Alright guys, we lost the recording for today's lecture, so we're going to give like a 1-minute summary. The source code for the daily assignment, I'll put in there and scroll down on it so you can type it in. But what we did is we went back to our Head First Programming text, the PDF, and Chapter 7 is about how to create a graphical user interface program. We had not done any of these. We had been doing, command line programs, text-based programs, where you just had a window full of text. But with a graphical user interface, you get a window with buttons, and you can move the window around and reassign it or minimize it and maximize it and do all that kind of stuff that you normally do with the windowed applications. So what we did is we used Python to create that application. And here's what our code looked like. Let's go take a look. So at the top, we had to import the TK interface library. And what this is supposed to be is a game show counter to where every time the user gets, or the contestant gets an answer correct, we press the correct button. Every time they get one wrong, we press the wrong button, and we keep track of how many correct guesses they had, how many wrong guesses they had, and then we keep we print out the average. Now the average is actually just going to be printed out into the text window rather than displayed on screen, so it's not really a perfect graphical user interface program. But it's a start, it was a start. So let's go back and look at the code. Here we go. We had to import the TK interface library. Put our title up here at the top, in-class GUI game.py, from TK enter, import asterisk. We need our counters. And then we had a function called print average. Now we hadn't used this keyword before, the global keyword. What this means is that we're using a variable that's defined somewhere else. If you define a variable inside a function, then that variable is only accessible inside that function. However, we want our functions to be able to access these values that are stored outside the function. And so that's what the global keyword means. It means that we're going to use a variable called correct, but it's defined outside of that function. And it's defined there. So that's why we have these two global keywords. And what the print average function does is it calculates the average by dividing the number of correct by the number of correct plus the number of incorrect. We could have also have calculated that first like this. Average is equal to correct divided by correct plus incorrect, and then print out the average. Then we have two functions here. One called correct guess and one called incorrect guess. I wish I'd called it wrong guess. So, but I'm going to leave it incorrect guess. I'm not going to make the changes. So we have our correct guess function. Again, it needs a global variable because each time the correct button is pressed, we increment the number of correct guesses. So we declare that as a global, and then we say correct equals correct plus 1. Or we could shorten that to correct plus equals 1. Then we just print out a message, the number of correct guesses. Might be nice if we also, printed out the number of incorrect guesses, but at the least we're also going to print the average. So at the end of our correct guess function, we call the print average function. Then we have the one that is called when the incorrect button is pressed. Again, it needs to access a global variable, so we have global incorrect. And when the button is pressed, we add 1 to the number of incorrect guesses. We print the number of incorrect guesses, and then we call the print average function to display their current average. Okay, so that's the setup for the program. You can go ahead and pause it and type this in if you need to. I didn't read it line by line, I don't think. So we have our import, our game counters, and our 3 functions. Go ahead and get those typed in. Now we have the code down here that creates our user interface. What's our user interface look like? It looks like this. It's a little window, kind of small. The window says Game Show. It's got a button for correct answers and a button for wrong answers. So that's what our user interface for our GUI looks like. GUI stands for Graphical User Interface. So to create our GUI, it looks like this. We're making a call into the TK interface library. So app is equal to TK with a capital T and then parentheses in parentheses. And we want to give our app a title. So app.title parentheses Game Show in quotes. Then we want to set the size of the app, of the window. And this syntax looks a little weird. So you're just going to have to type it in and, trust the force. Make sure, hope it works. So app.geometry. And then inside the parentheses, we have a quote, and then we have these words, these values. 300, lowercase x, 100, plus 200, plus 100. Now these first two numbers define the size of the window. This window is 300 wide by 100 tall. It's pretty small. And these numbers determine its position on the screen. 200 pixels over and then 100 pixels from the top. Then we create a button. So this syntax is B1 is equal to capital B button. And then inside the parentheses, we have app, because we're putting a button on our app. Here's the text of the button. So text equals, quote, correct, end quote. And then we have a comma. And then we have an attribute called width. So we put width is equal to 100. Another comma. And then command is equal to correct guess. Like that. That specifies which function is called when the button is clicked. So every time they click the correct button, it calls the correct guess function that we have defined higher in the program. And then we have to call this b1.pack. What pack does is it puts the button on the user interface, and it puts it on the left side. And it gives a little bit of padding so that it's not right at the edge. So b1.pack, and then inside the parentheses, side is equal to, quote, left, comma, pad x, PADX, is equal to 10, comma, and then pad y, PADY, is equal to 10. Just puts 10 pixels around the sides of the button. And you don't have to put all the spaces that I'm doing here. I'm just doing that to make it easier to read. Now button 2 looks very similar. You could pretty much just copy and paste the B1 button, paste it down here, and make a few changes like this. Copy B1, paste it, but change it to B2 is equal to button.app, B2.pack. The text needs to say incorrect or wrong. And then the command that's called is not correct guess, it's incorrect underscore guess. Otherwise, the lines are very similar. And then the next one, we're putting that button on the right side. So those are the two changes we made. B2 is equal to button, app, comma, text is equal to wrong, comma, width is equal to 10, comma, command is equal to incorrect guess. And then on the next line, b2.pack, parentheses, side equals, quote, right, end quote, comma, pad x equals 10, comma, pad y is equal to 10, parentheses. And then we have this call to the window, to our app window, called main loop. App.main loop, no spaces, and then the parentheses to invoke the main loop. All right, let's run it, see if it works. Press correct. It says correct guesses is equal to 1. Average is equal to 1. We click wrong. It says wrong guesses is equal to 1. Average is equal to 0.5. I think we could make this a little bit better. Why don't we tell both a number of correct and a number of incorrect every time they click it? So we're going to make couple little changes. One is we're going to remove our print statements from both the correct guess and from the incorrect guess functions. Just take out that purple print statement there. Leave the print average one in. And then take out the purple print statement from the incorrect guesses. Now, above the purple print statement in print average, let's print out correct equals, comma, correct, comma, quote, incorrect equals, quote, comma, incorrect. All right, now that every time they choose correct, it says correct 1, incorrect 0, average is 1, wrong, correct 1, incorrect 1, so they just have a 0.5 average now. And we could keep clicking these buttons. And then when we were tired of keeping track, we click the X, closes it. All right, so that's our little game tracker. That's our first GUI interface in the class. So I'm going to put it up at the top, pause it. You can pause yours, check your typing, then I'm going to scroll down. Notice there's a parentheses over here you can't quite see because I put so many spaces between the commas. I'm going to take some of those spaces out, at least one of them, so we can see that parentheses. All right, we're done. Hope that parentheses didn't mess you up earlier when you were testing it. Make sure you get that there.